It's gonna be like a mini podcast with just my voice. I was like, you can edit this as much as you need because I talk so much shit.
But I think that's great. Another episode up. We're here with you're always young in my eyes. The youngest and hardest working man in coffee business. Yeah.
I'm young-faced, but I'm getting
like
old in my
Alexander
body.
was.
I can feel it. Thanks for having me.
Yeah,
very,
it's great.
very exciting.
It's great. We have 2 coffees brewed in front of us that we're gonna try in a minute. It's the washed geisha from Jameson Savage, the iridescence, and to totally contrast that, it's the slightly overpowered Diego Bermudez coffee, the 720-hour thermal shock geisha that is heading out to our subscribers. Some of them actually today, but most is going to be produced and shipped on Monday.
Cool.
So
I'm excited.
Yeah. So tell us, where did it all start?
Yeah. Where did it all start? Good question. No, I think that coffee, for me, it started as like a drug, honestly. I was in high school. I was a little nerd, so I wanted to study a lot. And I started drinking like coffee to stay up late. So I would start with, like instant coffee. And then I moved on to pods. And I remember I bought a friend of mine had a pod machine, like the Nescafe one, and I thought it was so cool, but I couldn't afford the Nescafe. So I bought this like, the cheapest model, but it had a steam wand. So I could try to steam like cappuccinos and stuff. And it was horrible. It took like 2 minutes to steam like a small pitcher of milk, but it was cool.
Yeah.
And I think that like it's always like coffee's always kind of been there, but I never really took it seriously. It was more just like, oh, like I like coffee. And I think when I graduated high school, I moved to Melbourne. So I was in school outside of Melbourne. And then when I graduated, I moved to Melbourne, which is like this coffee mecca.
Yeah.
As a lot of people are experiencing right now at the MICE, the World Championships. And I started to get interested in like, not necessarily coffee itself, but just like nice cafes. I really like the vibe. And so, I would like kind of go out on the weekends and go have, probably like more a brunch than the coffee, but the coffee was always nice. And I thought it was cool that people were doing like latte art. And yeah, like then I started working. It's very common in Australia to work when you're studying. So I was studying at university, like fully focused on my studies and maybe a little bit too much partying. And then working on like weekends to have the money. And I started working in McDonald's actually. Like McCafe was McDonald's was my first job. And in Australia, it's just launched in Sweden, but in Australia at the time there was a thing called McCafe, which is like the barista made coffee, right? And I remember my first like month at McDonald's, I was like 18, and my first job, like when I first started, I was the fry guy, like the fry kid, so I was like cooking up fries, and I got I don't know how, but I got employee of the month, so that was like I don't know, I was doing really good fries apparently or something, and my prize was like, oh, you get to choose what you get trained on next, and I was like, actually, it would be cool to learn to make coffee, like to be in the McCafe. And they were like, we don't know about that. Like, we don't really bring people from like the main shop to the McCafe. You don't have any experience. So I was like, oh, like it would be fun, And, I kind of sweet talked the manager into letting me do it. And that was it. That was where the like kind of career started. And at the time, it wasn't going to be a career. It was just a side job, right? But it developed slowly, like more and more. The more I worked in the industry, the more I kind of got into it. And it wasn't like, even at the time, it wasn't necessarily about the coffee itself. It was more like I enjoyed making the coffee. So literally like actually latte art was the
Yeah.
big one.
Yeah.
Like, you know, doing the latte art, and talking to people. I was very shy, like in high school. You know, I was very like I kept to myself. I didn't have so many friends. Um, and I think I always struggled to like talk to people. I
Yeah.
was, you know, like I mean, I swear when I was like 16, I couldn't even talk to girls. And people see me now and they're like, "But you're so
Yeah.
confident." Like, but actually, I have a lot to thank like coffee and
Yeah.
working in coffee for that, because that was a really
Yeah.
good time for me to like.
Yeah, you're kind of in your comfort zone, and people come up to you and ask questions that you actually can answer
Yeah,
in a good
exactly.
way, and they
And
and
people
enjoy what you
like
do.
people come in and, you know, there's a very familiar, like, especially regulars, I think. um there's a very familiar, like, it's people that you don't really know, but
Mm.
you see them every day
Yep.
and you kind of have your like little chat.
Yep.
And there's a lot of
Mm.
familiarity with that, which I think is really
Yeah.
nice. Like, it's a really nice part of working in coffee.
Yeah.
um I mean, you would experience that with Drop,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Definitely.
Like,
So much like the social part of it, and like growing as a barista, and know people, and people actually like coming back over years.
yeah.
Really,
Yeah, and
you're there
you
for
make
them.
these connections with
Yeah.
these people. Like, I mean, I still run into old
Ah.
regulars from Pascal,
Yeah.
so where I worked,
Yeah.
you know, when I moved to Sweden, and they still remember me
Yeah.
as the barista and stuff like that. And it's like, oh, like, you know, what are you up to now? Um, so I actually really like
Yeah.
that about the kind of coffee industry, because I don't think you get that in anything else really. Like, if you're a bartender, obviously you've got like, you might have regulars or whatever, but it's a different kind of environment. It's not
Not
that
hear
kind
what
of
people
like,
say.
yeah, exactly. It's more like taking people's orders and like trying
Yeah.
to control the
Yeah.
craziness.
Yeah.
But, and like, you know, obviously like chefs, they're
Yeah.
working in the kitchen. Maybe like being like a waiter or something is kind of the next.
Yep.
But being a barista and working in a cafe,
Yeah.
you really have that like daily
Yeah.
contact with a whole range of people, which I think is pretty cool.
So, from the Mac Cafe, did you work with real specialty coffee in Australia before you moved to Sweden?
Not before I moved. Before I moved, I had a bit of a funny journey
Yeah.
actually. So when I started in Australia in the cafe, I mean, obviously my cafe, it's not specialty coffee. It was not bad, honestly, but it wasn't specialty. And then I worked for, it must have been 2.5 years, no, 3 years in Australia before moving away. And so at first it was like a part-time job, so weekends and stuff. And then as I got, like, actually, the more I worked in it, the more I wanted to work in the industry. So I started to, you know, like pick up extra shifts.
Yeah.
And then the last like 8 months, so I actually dropped out of university. So I stopped studying to follow like the coffee, the coffee passion. And then I obviously worked full time in coffee.
Yeah.
But I never worked in a specialty place, which was, I think, like right at the end when I went full time, that was when I started to get kind of interested in specialty.
Yeah.
So I read, you know, like Matt Perger's blog, Barista Hustle, and I was trying to learn, like, I wouldn't have been able to tell you what specialty coffee is, but I was trying to learn about, you know, extraction and how to make the most out of the coffee you're given, kind of thing. And then, but the thing that I worked on a lot in Australia, especially in Melbourne, and especially the places that I worked in, it was very much about speed. How many cups per hour can you do? Like, or how many kilos per hour can you handle? And for busy cafes, that's kind of, you know, time is money.
Yeah.
And if they need to put 2 baristas to handle a rush as opposed to 1, then they double their cost.
You're not yet just up-dosing your espresso to 35 grams.
Not quite.
Like, yes, I did 10 kilos in an
Yeah,
hour.
like a kilo to dial in, you know. Like, oh, nice, we sold 2 kilos already. No, so it was, and that was really like, I ended up getting quite quick, and I really pushed myself to be like, okay, what's the most efficient? And I
can't find a better way to learn coffee than in Australia. Like,
yeah, especially in those high volume cafes, you know, you're
amazing.
getting absolutely smacked.
Yeah.
Like, and so that that was really what I kind of took with me when I moved away. It was more the speed and the kind of confidence behind the bar. And then when I moved away and I moved to Paris, a cafe called Coutume. They're still around, like specialty roaster. Tom, who's actually an Australian, is one of the co-founders.
They have like 2 shops, or
They have a lot now. Yeah,
there's a
they
lot,
have
right?
like, it must be. I actually don't know, but I think they're growing quite a lot. Like, which is great for them. And they were one of the kind of pioneers of specialty coffee in Paris. They were like one of the early ones, and that was just a completely different. It was almost a different kind of job for me, because when I went there, I mean, I'd never really used scales before. It was more like I'd started using scales just before I left on my own initiative to be like, okay, I'm going to dial in the coffee. But once I set the time and once I set the volume, I wouldn't bring out the scales for like the rest of the day kind of thing. And then I went to Paris and they were like, yeah, so normally we're 2 baristas in the bar, and I wasn't used to that because I used to being like solo and being quick. And so we have, this grinder is a single origin espresso, and this grinder is for the milk beverages. It's a blend, it's a bit more chocolatey. And so we're going to weigh every shot, and we're going to also weigh the kind of the yield. So like we had a Senesso, I remember, I think it's a Senesso Syncra. So it's like, it's just a paddle machine on and off kind of thing.
machine.
Yeah, they're really nice actually.
I always call them like clunky.
A little bit, yeah. I mean, I will always have very, very fond memories of that place, of that machine as well. I mean, that machine, I really learnt about specialty there, and and so they were like, yeah, use the paddle and weigh every shot, and they would even weigh like the cappuccino. So if it was, obviously foam like is lighter than the milk, and so if the cappuccino was heavier, I can't remember, I think it was like 180 grams or something, then they would say like, it's not enough foam in the cappuccino. So I'd come from this experience where it was like, speed, just pump out coffee, to being like, no, this cappuccino is 195 grams, so we're gonna do it again. And I mean, that was such a shock to me. But I think it was really good. Like, it taught me a completely different side of coffee that I'd never experienced before. And then, I actually remember during like the interview that I had with the manager of the shop when I first got in. He was asking me about like AeroPress and AeroPress recipes, and I'd like just gotten into AeroPress. I think I just bought like my first AeroPress or something. And he was like, oh yeah, so if you're gonna make an AeroPress, what kind of recipe would you use? And I think it was like the night before, I was like Googling recipes so that I could make my coffee in the morning on an AeroPress. And I was like, it was so perfect. And then so I was like, oh yeah, so you want to use like 17 grams and then put in like 200 ml and like stir it like this. Yeah.
1.5 minute bloom.
And which I just completely memorized from the night before.
I haven't even done it yet.
Yeah, like barely. I think I made it once and I fucked it up. And he was like, okay, yeah, like, about coffee, that's fine. So that was my first experience in coffee. It wasn't, and I'd been in coffee for, I was maybe like 3.5, 4 years at that point. So it was a long time. Yeah. So I think my journey in coffee has been very flipped to a lot of people. People generally have like the interest in coffee first, and then, or in the specialty coffee first before going into the industry. Definitely. But for me, it was more like, it was just fun. Like, it was the people and the latte art and stuff like that before I actually appreciated the product for what it was.
Just gonna take a short break.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, we can see if it cuts out.
Yep. Great. So, you had some coffee.
I've pretty much finished my coffee.
That's good. So then, from Paris to Stockholm?
So Paris, it was a bit of a longer journey. So in Paris, I ended up working at this place, Coutume, for a number of months. And I really got interested in coffee then. That was when I started to really get interested in like the craft of coffee and specialty coffee. And so I really pushed myself, like, I was 21 living by myself in Paris. I didn't really know anyone. No. And so on my days off, I would like go to the Roastery and just be like, I want to learn about coffee kind of thing. So I really pushed myself. And then obviously I had the ground of being like very confident on the bar, very quick enough. And then there was an opportunity that came up to go to Switzerland.
Mhm.
So they were going to open a new shop in Switzerland. It was their first one, or sorry, their second one abroad. And it was kind of like this, it wasn't a franchise, but it was like a partnership kind of thing with these two guys. So I ended up getting offered the job to go. You know, I was young. I didn't have a family or anything, so I could just go. And that was kind of, yeah. So then I moved to Switzerland to help open that cafe, and that was such a big like moment for me, I think, because when I left Australia, my plan was to be like 1 year in France and come back. And when I left Australia, you know, I didn't really know what specialty coffee was, and the plan wasn't even to work in coffee. It was like, oh, I'm gonna work in like a winery kind of thing. And then, you know, I got the job at Coutume because it was a coffee job, something that I was familiar with. And then when I got offered this job in Switzerland, it was like the first real, like, proper kind of coffee job that I was really excited about. And I think that changed a lot. Like, I told my friends and family back home, like, yeah, look, I think I'm going to be here for a while. Like, I don't think I'll just come back after a year. I want to take this seriously and do it. And then so I moved to Switzerland, and then
Your parents was like, what about school?
yeah, no, but I mean, I still have family who are like, oh, so when you go back to study, like, what do you know? And I'm like, you know, I like,
Now it's too late.
I'm not going back. Like, like I have like a full-time job and everything now, but yeah, I mean, but it's also funny, you know, my family, like, my dad was a doctor.
Yeah.
And his dad was a doctor, and my older brother is a doctor, and there's one person in my family, like, on that, you know, of the boys in the family who isn't a doctor, but he works in private equity, and he's like very successful in that. And then
Barista,
so here
that's
I
the
was when
thing.
when I dropped out, I
Yeah.
was like, yeah, like, I'm gonna do this coffee
Ah.
thing. I think everyone was like, hold on a second, like, what's this? And yeah, I didn't really even have a plan when I left. I was just like, I'm just gonna see what happens. Like, you know, I think I had a bit of a mindset shift. Like, this was 2015 when I dropped out. And like at the start of that year, I kind of started really thinking like, I'm not really happy with what I'm studying. Like, I don't really see myself doing this like as a career. And you know, I'm in it for kind of superficial reasons. Like, the reason I went into I studied maths. Like, the reason that I went into studying that was because my teacher said, yeah, like, if you study maths, you'll make a lot of money, kind of thing. And I realized around that time, like, everyone else who I'm studying with is very, very interested and excited about this. Like, we would get an assignment, I remember, and people would be like, yeah, like, let's go to the library and work on it. And I'd be like, nah, see ya, I'm gonna go home. And I had this kind of mindset shift. I don't know, it was like I was reading a lot about, like, you know, personal development and stuff as well. And I kind of started thinking like, look, you know, I can do whatever I want with my life, and actually, like, I want to live life as an adventure. Like, I'd rather take a risk and it completely blow up in my face. Like, what's the worst thing that can happen? I'll just go back home and like work in a cafe. You know, I've got that as a ground. And so I think that after that, like, every kind of opportunity that was like scary but cool, I would take it regardless of what it was. And then so when I lived in Switzerland, I took this job, opened the cafe, and for a bunch of reasons, nothing major, but a lot of small things just made it that I didn't end up wanting to stay. And so after Switzerland, that was when I kind of decided. There was a little bit of a period there between where I was traveling with a friend and trying to figure out what to do next. Because I just told my friends and family back home, like, oh, like, you know, I'm gonna be here for a couple of years. Like, this is a really good job opportunity for me. And that was the first job, actually, like, talking about my family. And actually, I have to say, my family's always been very supportive of me. Like, my mom, my dad, everyone has been like, yeah, like, you know, you really do what you want to do, like, follow your dreams, kind of thing. So I've never felt pressure or like anything like that. But I think that when I got that job in Switzerland,
But you're also extremely driven.
yeah,
And that I think there's a lot of people like, I'm just gonna go to France,
yeah,
work as a barista.
yeah,
Like,
chill out.
You're on another like level of
Yeah, I can have both, I think.
Yeah.
Like I think if I set my mind to something,
Yeah.
I'll do everything I possibly can to get it.
Yeah.
But if I don't have like if I'm kind of floating, I
Mm.
can very much just float and
Mm.
do like
Mm.
whatever. So I need to have that kind of focus.
Yeah.
But that job in Switzerland, that was like for a bit for my family, and I think for my friends as well. That was kind of the first like, oh, actually no, he's doing well for him. Like, you know, he's actually got like this job and it's
Mm.
really nice and
Mm.
it's like a full-time
Mm.
job and
Mm.
it's a cool
Mm.
kind of
Mm.
thing. And then when I left after only 6 months, I think I didn't want to go back home being like defeated,
No.
you know? So I was like, damn, what am I gonna do now? And then I kind of got back to that kind of mindset of like, okay, well, what's the coolest thing to do?
Yeah.
You know, like what if I'm gonna do this whole life is an adventure thing?
Yeah.
What's the coolest thing that I can do to like have a cool story to tell? You know. And then that was when I decided like, oh, I want to go to Scandinavia. Not necessarily Sweden, but just like any Scandinavian country.
Is it due to the Scandinavian roast profile vibe?
It was a few things, yeah. That of it definitely, and like I know that Scandinavia, like you know, Norway, Denmark, Sweden, early days barista championships. That was like, you know, they were very strong. And then I think, you know, obviously Matt Perger was a pretty big influence in my early like barista career, and I knew that he'd spent a few months with Copy. So I knew of Copy and them, and then like at the time, the best coffee I'd ever tasted was from Coffee Collective, and so I was like, oh yeah, Coffee Collective, like that's nice. And you know, there's like Tim Vendelbo and Oslo and stuff, so there was like enough of like a draw that like I wanted to come to Scandinavia. And of course, you know, not necessarily just coffee stuff. Like for Australians, Scandinavia is so far away and it's such like a mystical land. Like, you know, we for us, we don't really get seasons. It's like it's really hot or it's like a bit less hot and it rains, you know. And you know, we don't have snow, or at least not in like the big cities. And you know, you look at Scandinavia and you're like, oh my god, they have like the Northern Lights, and they have like, you know, snow during winter and like the midnight sun. Like that's so cool, kind of thing.
Never seen the midnight
yeah,
sun.
exactly. And so when I moved to Sweden, or when I decided to move to Scandinavia, it was like, okay, this is like it's gonna be a cool story, whatever happens, kind of thing. Started applying for all these jobs, just like scattershot, like, you know, where can I get a job? So I was like emailing, you know, I would just like Google top 10 cafes in each city, like Stockholm, Oslo, Copenhagen. And I would just like blind email, just be like, hey, my name's Pierre, I'm a barista from Australia, like this is my experience. Do you need a barista, kind of thing? And then it was Pascal who replied. And I think that they misunderstood my mail, which is very lucky for me. And they kind of said, because I was in Italy traveling with a friend. I was in Rome, I remember. And they replied and they were like, yeah, cool. Like, do you want to come tomorrow for an interview? Yeah. And I was like, oh, look, tomorrow's going to be pretty tough. Like, I'm not in Stockholm yet. But when do you need a barista by? Like, I can just come. And they're like, yeah, like early May would be good. This is 2017 now. And I was like, yeah, okay. And this was like middle of April. And so I was like, yeah, okay, that's like 2 weeks, you know, time. So I was like, cool, like I can be, and I looked at my calendar. I was like, I can be in Stockholm like I can come in on like the 5th of May, kind of thing, like a Friday. And they're like, yeah, great, like, you know, we'll see you then. So I was like, cool, I guess I'm moving to Stockholm. Yeah. And like, I mean, I knew no one in Stockholm. I didn't know anyone in Stockholm. I'd never been. Like, I had one friend who'd been to Stockholm for like 3 days when she was backpacking around. Then she was like, yeah, like it's a pretty cool city. I was like, okay. And then so I literally like, I booked a flight, like I went back through Paris to pick up some stuff from like my grandma who lives outside of Paris, and moved up to Stockholm. And like, I landed at like midnight, like really late at night, I remember. And I took the Flygbus into Stockholm, and I had no idea where I was. Like, and I stayed in a hostel. And I landed, like, by the time I got into the hostel, it was past midnight. It was like 12:30 or something. I stayed in a dorm, you know, like with a bunch of people who'd gone out the night before.
Shift started 7 hours later.
Yeah, like literally. And then so the next morning, I literally, like, I woke up and I went to this job interview. And they were like, yeah, you know, like, come in tomorrow for a trial, kind of thing. Like a busy Saturday on Pascal. And so I went in on the next day, and I hadn't made coffee for like 3 months. So I was like super, super rusty, right? And I remember it was quite busy. Like it was pretty busy that day. And you know, I was like making the coffee, and I'm quite comfortable when it's busy. Like I don't lose my cool or anything. And they were like, "Oh, do you need help or anything?" I was like, "Oh no, I'm okay. Like it's okay. I can handle this." And they were like, "Oh, nice."
Mm.
And then the trial went super well. And then yeah, like they were like, "Yeah, cool, you can start next week." Next week. So then I was like, "Cool, I'm in Stockholm then." So it was like really cool. Like it was a really cool. It's a cool story to tell.
Yeah.
It was a really cool experience at the time. Like because my mind was completely open. I was like, what's like, you know, if I don't get this job at Pascal, then I can always apply for other cafes in Stockholm, right? There's not just Pascal. And yeah, so that's how I got to Stockholm. So it was a wild ride. 2017.
And they only had one cafe then, right?
That was correct. Exactly. Yeah. So that was the year before they started. So actually when I started, there was only one person before me who'd been like, no, maybe two, who'd been like official baristas.
Yeah.
Because it was them, like the owners who were making the coffee as well.
But I must say that Pascal is the most. I only been to Australia and Melbourne for a week during the World Championships, like 8 years ago, whatever. But Pascal is definitely the most Melbourne-ish cafe.
Yeah.
Of what I can see, like, because what I got really, really impressed of when I was there was like the level of food. You talked about brunch, and on top of that, they had like amazing coffee.
Yeah.
In Sweden, everything is much slower and smaller, and it's like, this is a specialty coffee shop.
Yeah.
And we maybe have a sandwich.
Yeah.
Like they had something for everyone, and I think that's what Pascal makes them so great.
Yeah.
They have something for everyone. They have delicious food, great coffee, and they have the volumes.
Yeah.
Like, so when you get in there, you feel like, oh my God, I mean,
something's
I'm in
happening
this. Like
here.
something is happening here. You're not the only one coming in, having your V60, being the nerd in the room kind of thing. It's like everyone's.
And I think that I like really credit to them, because they nail that really well. Like they invest, you know, in good quality like staff, you know, or good quality produce, obviously. So good food, good coffee, good everything. And they bring in good staff. So they let that staff like run it. So they'll bring in, like, for example, for me, they brought me in as the coffee guy, and they really gave me like kind of free hands to do what I wanted with the coffee thing. And then same with like the kitchen. So the kitchen guys have like a lot of creative power. And I think that that's such a beneficial way, like a great way to run the business, as opposed to focusing on one thing. Because I think, like, you know, we talked about Melbourne and the coffee scene in Melbourne, and there are some like specialty coffee places. But I think what is great about the coffee scene in Melbourne is a lot of the places that do good coffee, they're actually brunch places, and people go there for the brunch, but then they also can get a good cup of coffee. And I think that people kind of, especially nowadays, like, people are like, I'm going to open a specialty cafe. And that's great, but it's also hard to make it work, right?
Such a big engine to start with brunches.
Yeah.
Like, there's one thing to invest like in a good espresso machine and some good beans and a good barista, but to make, like, I don't know, poached eggs, a special thing, and like salads and like meat on top of that, and feed them with rules and stuff.
Yeah. Oh, it's so tough.
Big thing to do, and you need like a chef and you people, and so it's hard.
But I think that people, the majority of people, if you're not like a coffee interested person, a lot of people go to places for the food, not necessarily for the coffee. Especially like the brunch places and stuff like that. And then, you know, to their kind of credit, like, it would be easy to just focus on the food and forget about the coffee, you know, like, oh, we can just put a brewer in the back. But then if you can have that kind of complete package where you're doing good food, good coffee, obviously good service as well, then the experience for the guest, kind of regardless of where they come from, if they come for the food or if they come for the coffee, they're going to have a good experience regardless. And I think that there's a lot of opportunity in a kind of setup like that. So yeah.
And then you also have the groups, like you have your grandma, you have your wife, you have a friend and your kid with you. Like, some don't do lactose, some is hungry,
right?
One is a coffee geek.
Yeah.
Like, then it's hard to go into some cafes.
Yeah.
Like, I'm super hungry.
Yeah.
I can't just have a croissant.
Right.
I need something more. And I'm like, where's the geisha coffee?
Right.
Like, so it's like, and I think that's the power when you have the opportunity and muscles of building something.
To do something like that.
I wonder
Yeah.
if Pascal will have 10 places in 10 years.
Yeah, I wonder if that's where they want to go.
I don't know.
Is
Yeah.
the question.
They could definitely do it,
I
but
think they could. Yeah.
they have so much staff there
Yeah.
on Saturdays.
Yeah.
Doing 10 times that with 10
Yeah.
it's like 200 people that needs to be involved.
But I think as well, like, you know, when it gets to that level, the staff become an investment. Like
Yeah.
it becomes like how much can you serve per hour kind
Yeah.
of thing. Because it's not like, oh, we need to get customers through the door. It's we need to get customers served quickly because the line is always going to be that.
You maybe should be the new expansion.
The expansion manager,
chief.
exactly.
Yeah. Pascal, get
I
like,
have a plan.
10 million billion euros and then
Yeah.
just go across Europe.
Exactly. Oh, Sep, I'm waiting for the offer.
Yeah.
Um,
That's cool.
no, I mean, yeah, like that. I think like you see that, you know, the machine of Pascal when it's working,
Yeah.
like when they're busy, it's a well-oiled machine.
Yeah,
There's no
it's-
problems. Customers are happy, but
clean.
it's clean, but it's pumping.
Yes.
Like you're crushing coffees, food, everything's
Yeah.
going out. And that's really nice. I think that's really great.
That's cool.
But yeah, it's I think like what's your experience with Drop, for example? Because you guys really opened up with as like a coffee place.
Yeah,
right?
definitely. We until 2014 when I left, we were like Eric really wanted to bring in a soup,
Right.
like to not miss the opportunity of that hungry grandma.
Right.
And I was like, let's skip milk instead. Kind of thing. We were focusing so much on especially the filter brewers. Like we had like 8 or 10 V60s
Okay.
in long
Right.
line, just pumping out.
But at the time was V60 like did people even know what it was?
No.
No.
No, and we didn't use scales. We just
Okay.
because we got like I know that Blue Bottle back then just pumped out coffee on V60s. They
Right.
just put the cup underneath. They kind of poured feeling
Freestyle. Yeah.
freestyle. But the cool thing about it that you talk about in Melbourne is like talk about pumping out, you talk about crushing, you talk about speed.
Yeah.
Like how many cups per hour can you make?
Right.
The problem I think with the specialty coffee scene in Stockholm or whatever, and what we kind of it's the lack of speed. Like,
Yeah.
a drop back then came in like, oh, I want one V60. And for a while, before we realized like we need to use scales because
Right.
this is just a mess.
Yeah.
We had speed,
Right.
even on the hand brew,
Right.
like drip. So, but when the scales arrived, like people had to wait for like 30 minutes for
Okay.
their cup of coffee.
Right.
And I think that's the balance.
Yeah.
Like
yeah. Speed versus precision.
speed versus precision. Yeah. And then batch brewers came in.
Right.
Like, oh, that's good. But then you lost the whole like craft of it.
Right.
Then you focus on espresso
Right.
because that is like you have a certain amount of time slot. You can push out a lot of coffee.
Right.
But then milk comes in. That kind of takes away the focus from the core product. Because
Right.
there's not that many people drinking single espressos.
No.
I don't have a really good answer for it.
But I think as well when because you guys were roasting at the time, right?
Yes.
You guys were
Yeah.
roasting by then. Then like
In shop.
Yeah. That's cool. I wish we could see more of that.
Yeah.
It's tough in Stockholm with
Yeah.
the laws and
Yeah,
stuff.
but the new Loring roasters are opening up
yeah,
for that. So
if you're willing to wait 2 years.
if you're willing to wait 2 years for a new roaster and you're willing to pay $1 billion for
Right.
a coffee roaster, that's kind of cool. Because you see, I actually ended up at Coffee Collective in their roastery 2-3 times now for the last
Right.
2 years by different reasons.
Yeah.
And I think they have a little bit, and
Yeah.
especially the roaster that's kind of in shop. It's
Yeah.
it's there. It's really cool to
Yeah.
see.
Yeah, I think as well from a customer's perspective, you walk into a place like that, and you kind of immediately understand that it's not just a normal cafe, like it's a production space or it's a workspace. And I think that like there's nothing wrong with, I mean, the hard thing, I think, you know, for young or new business owners who want to open cafes, like there needs to be some commercial kind of thought behind it. Like if you're just going to serve specialty coffee and pour over,
Mm.
without having anything else, it's going to be really tough. You're only taking like 50, 60 crowns per cup, right? But with the roastery, then you have that kind of, you can sell bags, you can sell volume, and you have this like production.
Yeah.
Um,
And also,
yeah.
if we talk about my grandma a lot, like
Right.
when you bring her, you don't bring her to a place that she expects eat something at,
Right.
because it's a coffee roastery.
Yeah.
It's like, it's something unique, and it's like, oh, I'm gonna try this fresh roasted, and
Right.
then produce it there. We can eat later.
Yeah.
Like, but if you say, let's go to a cafe, or let's go like out for brunch, and there's no
Yeah.
food, it's like, oh my
Yeah.
god.
Yeah, but I think that like I've seen it in a few places. The places can get a little bit mixed between. Like
Yeah.
they want to do the specialty
Yeah.
coffee like showroom style
Mm.
thing, which is then going to require like, 8 pour over stations and like a coffee bar, and really focus on that kind of
Yeah,
thing.
and probably prices up to like euros or 150
Yeah,
kroners a cup.
absolutely. Yeah, and you can bring in like
Yeah.
high quality lots and
Yeah.
stuff. And I think that obviously you're not going to sell it to everyone, but people appreciate that. But then I've seen some places kind of get lost in the middle. They want to do the coffee, but they also bring in food because they think it's going to help. And excuse me.
Yeah.
And I think that it's very like a place that has a really clear like concept. If you walk in, you immediately know that, okay, this isn't just a cafe. Like April showroom in Copenhagen, I think is a good example of that. You walk in, you realize like, okay, this isn't a cafe.
Yeah.
This is something else kind of thing. This is a showroom, or a lab, coffee lab or something. And then, because from a customer's perspective, like if you go into a place like this and they're serving like kind of, I don't want to say half-assed food, but kind of, then it's kind of going to be disappointing for everyone. Like then the focus wants to be on the coffee, but then someone might just be hungry and they want a frother, and then but the frother isn't quite the same level as the coffee and stuff like that. Whereas if you have like a really clear like picture, like Pascal, we talked about before, or like if you have the brunch thing and you take it seriously, like you're gonna draw in the brunch crowd, and then if you have the good coffee on the side, like to complement that, then that's fine. Like that's a great thing. Or if you're gonna do like the coffee lab, then you do the coffee lab and you do it to the full. And then there's a place in Melbourne. It's called Auntie Peg's, and it's the Proud Mary Coffee Roastery like lab there, and that's insane. It's so cool. They have like, and they really take the lab experience to the next level. Have you ever been there? It's they have, at least they did last time I went, which was 4 years ago. But they used to have this there's like 2 EK43s on the back wall with the hoppers built like on it.
But do they have the freeze wall thing?
Yeah, exactly. But they have a freezer mounted onto the wall, where the hopper is, like, and the EK is like mounted into the freezer. So great, like, and you'd never see that in a normal cafe, but in a lab like that, you kind of understand like, oh, this is kind of next level.
Alexander sent me a reel on Instagram 2 days ago with a setup like that, with 8 hoppers.
Right. So crazy.
Like this sliding doser.
Okay.
Slide, and it was
so
unreal.
Cool.
Yeah. And I wonder if that would work in Stockholm, because I think still we lack volumes.
Yeah.
A lot.
But it's also hard to compare Stockholm, which is 1 million people, to like London, which is 10, right? Like it's, and I've made this not mistake, but I often compare Stockholm to Melbourne.
Yeah.
Because they are quite different. But then it's also important to remember that Melbourne is like 5 million people, and it's a huge city. Like
I don't know, people don't drink that much coffee at home, right?
No, not so much. Well, it's a different culture over there. Like it's a lot of milk drinks. Like people, their regular drink is like a cappuccino or a latte, and not everyone's going to invest in a espresso machine at home, because it is an investment, right? Like, and so people get that, people get their coffees on the way to work in the morning. So the takeaway rush in Australia is kind of like one of the busiest times of the day. And in Sweden, obviously, there's brew coffee, which is the most popular drink. And, you can buy a brewer for like 500 crowns from, Klasåsen or whatever. And then you have brew coffee at home.
Yeah.
So I think it's a bit different cultures there. But I agree. I think that Stockholm, like, I wish there was more volume.
Yeah.
But it's but I think it's also going to come. Like, I think that the key to Stockholm, coming from a non-cafe owner and a foreigner, but the key to Stockholm is like, or Sweden, is have coffee, obviously take coffee seriously and do it as best as you can, but have it as a complement to something else. And then have that other thing driving the business. So if you want to do, selling coffee bags or roasting, then use that as the driver of the business. Or like if you want to do brunch, then you use that. And then people will more easily relate to the brand if you do something like that.
I think there's opportunity if you're gonna do if Standout is gonna open a bar. I think it might end up being an single espresso focused bar.
Right.
Because I think you can have
Is
like
there
a small
talks of that?
space.
Is this the scoop? You heard it here first, folks.
When the bag of money arrives for you to open 50 Pascals, we can take some of that and open 10 espresso bars. No, but I think like for the regular Swedish drinker, I think go to have like the opportunity to have 3 or 4 different single espresso grinders, kind of no food, and just focus on that. So you know that that's what you get, kind of thing. You don't have seats to like, I don't know, but like.
But I mean, that ties so well into your concept too, right? You're doing like the highest of the high end, like specialty,
because
like
we could do
competition
like
coffee
single
almost.
espresso from 5 to 20 euros.
Right.
Like because if you do like the Finca Deborah stuff, whatever, it's super expensive.
Right.
And roasted and brewed to perfection. But the good thing with espresso is that you can brew it to perfection. Like you have like a 3-group machine, 6 espressos time, and it takes like 30 seconds. You can redose EK43, whatever. You can do it all the way, but still have the perfect shot, and people never will wait 2 minutes. And they can stand, enjoy it, have like mind-blowing experience of espresso that's out of this world.
Right.
Maybe get something, bring home. I don't know what that could be, but and I do love espresso.
Right.
So,
but do you think that would you completely kind of cut out the option for milk? Because I mean, the milk beverage is a thing in and of itself, right? Like it's in the barista
most
championships.
Fun thing is the pour latte art.
Well, yeah,
like,
but I think that like a really well executed like cappuccino, for example, can be just as good as like a really nice espresso. And there's an art in that as well, like
look
getting
at the
milk
stuff
right.
Like we can shift focus to the WBC now in Melbourne.
Right.
Actually, shout out to Patrick Rolfe, who came to the finals. There.
Yeah.
And
best place Swedish barista in many years.
15 years. I think Anno Lunell came 4th like 15 years ago or something.
Wow.
That is so cool.
Yeah.
He looked a bit disappointed. I didn't see the final routine. I see the semi-final routine was
I think if we're talking about people being driven, like Patrick has this kind of singular like focus on a goal kind of thing. I've never seen it like
and
before.
Ben Putt didn't win. Sadly, he's been in the final so many times. But the Australian boy won.
Cool.
And Morgan from the state came 2nd. He won last year.
Fantastic.
But talking about competition, and I saw a lot of like you talked about cappuccinos, and a lot of the baristas now, they freeze the milk.
Yeah.
And they distill.
Yeah, freeze distilling. Yeah. It's super popular.
So it gets super, super sweet. And I think Patrick added some enzymes or something to take away the lactose.
Right.
I didn't know that was allowed.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
Because I know that I haven't competed.
Did he say it during his presentation, or was it?
Okay. Yeah, definitely. It probably gets super sweet, like all lactose-free milks are, kind of.
Right.
But I didn't know that you were allowed to bring anything into the milk. But I haven't.
Yeah, but it's also interesting. Like, where does it? How much can you manipulate the milk? Like, when is freeze distilling allowed, and like putting enzymes in not allowed? Right? Like, there's a bit of a funny.
Because we talked about Katarina last episode about them pushing into the competition scene to actually get oats or alternative milk. She talked about not only oat milk into the competition scene because it should be a competition for everyone. So why not? Because the cappuccino as it is in the competition now is not a cappuccino anymore. It's a milk beverage. You can have like a 50-50 macchiato thing kind of. So why not just allow any sort of milk?
Yeah.
But then it's like what's the point of that versus the signature beverage?
But I
That's
think
kind
as
of
well,
the same thing, but you just add sugar like
Right.
everyone does, and like call it I don't know, reduction or
yeah. But I wonder if they do change the rules, the
Yeah.
SCA, like the global SCA, if there will be adoption, because it does come down to the points, right?
Yeah.
Like people are going to look at the scoring, and if the milk or the whatever is overpowering the espresso, is it going to be interesting to even use alternative
No.
milk anyway?
No.
Like, and as you mentioned, like freeze distilling, I'd say is very is prevalent everywhere. And that is just because it hacks the points.
Yeah.
Like you get like full texture, full body, high sweetness, like everything. And
it's like the Agenitis.
yeah,
I actually
yeah.
don't know what coffee the Australian barista used,
No, I don't
but
know.
Morgan, second year in a row, she used the Agenitis. That is like totally impossible to get your hands on.
Right.
We got like 20 or 30 grams here last year,
Okay.
like half a year ago. I never tried anything
Right.
like that. It was drinking a juice filled up with sweeteners, suketter.
Yeah.
I don't know what this small like they put into
Sweetness,
coffee.
yeah.
Sweetness. And that was
Crazy.
it.
Yeah.
I was like 2 sips. Okay, no more thanks. But it was
Super
crazy.
cool. Yeah.
I will see if it expands into other farms.
So competition.
We talked about competition.
Yeah.
Are you back? Will you be back on the competition scene?
I don't think so. My competition days are behind me. I've never. I think maybe 1 year I took it.
Yeah,
I took it serious. Like I really tried.
Yeah.
And I got disqualified. So nice. It was in 2018 when I just moved to Sweden. It was in Jönköping.
Yeah.
I think maybe you guys were
I
there.
was there.
But I took on way too much. I decided it was my first ever competition, and like coming up through, especially after being in Paris and being around like this specialty kind of coffee, I was like, yeah, I really want to compete now. Like this is the next step. But then I just took on way too much. So I was like, I'm gonna do Brewers Cup and Barista Championships without a team, without a coach. I'm just gonna actually I had Daniel Rumheden help me a lot actually. Because I knew that he came top 6. He was really good in 2009, I think, in the world. And so I reached out to him, and Pascal at the time was using Love Coffee, so I was like, hey man, I'm thinking of competing. Like, can you help me out? So he helped me like pick a coffee, and he helped coach me a little bit. But I just took on way too much. Like, doing for the first time ever Brewers and Barista, like, it was just too much. And so I got down to Jönköping, and everyone else had like teams, or at least like a helper. And I was just by myself, and I had like 2 big boxes, like 1 big box for Brewers Cup stuff and 1 big box for Barista. And I was like, what have I gotten myself into? And we got the schedule, and I was like Brewers Cup, like the it was like one after the other after the other, and I was like, oh, this is gonna be a disaster kind of thing. So I think I did Brewers first, and I did pretty well, like got through the finals, so that was really nice. And I was really happy for that. But the barista like the barista presentation that I did was just a disaster. I decided to do this like pink grapefruit kind of thing for my signature drink. And I thought that part of the show could be that I prepare it on stage. So I had a grapefruit and a cutting board and stuff, and I was cutting into it, and there was juice going everywhere. And I was like, I think I started doing my signature drink at 14 minutes, and I had to cut it, juice it, pour it all in together with the espresso. Like, it was a disaster. So I ended up going, I was like, and I think there's probably the video somewhere, like on YouTube or something. But if you watch the video, I start talking really quick. Like, I have a moment where I realize, I have 1 minute left, and I have so much left to do. And I just start talking so quick, and you can't even understand what I'm saying. So that was a bit of a disaster. So I don't think I'll compete again. I love being part of the competitions, and obviously I've been on Team Sweden with Matt Winton when he was competing in Barista Championships. And
so much time that goes into it.
It's crazy, and I really respect the people who do compete and go to that kind of level, because it's every single thing is thought about. But you've competed and you've been to the World Championships.
And I think of doing it again. But Alexander stopped me this year because we need to focus on what we do, and I think I'm getting old now, and if I'm gonna do it, I want to do it full out, a 3-year plan,
Right.
big sponsors,
Yeah.
like ride on like some big companies like promotion tour, whatever.
Right.
Like do this, like, so we're gonna do brewers, we're gonna do barista for 3 years. The goal is not to win in Jönköping next week. It's gonna be like the 3-year journey,
Right.
and of course to be to the world championships.
Yeah.
And when you get there, you can put other goals up, but to really like be true to yourself and
Right.
say this will cost a lot of money. This
Right.
will take a lot of
You
time.
understand, yeah.
And to get there, we need to bring in other stuff. Because back at Drop, when we started competing, had nothing. But what we did from the start, what we called, I think it was Skåne Mejerier or something.
Right.
Like, and they were like, "Oh my God, this is so cool. How much do you want?" And we
Right.
were like, so we were covering like coaches and tickets and a lot of stuff,
Yeah.
and actually some time to practice. And I think I asked some competing baristas for the Swedish Barista Cup, like, yeah, and what's your sponsors? Like,
Yeah.
do you do this on your in the evenings, or can you do this on work hours?
Right.
And they have literally nothing.
Yeah.
And it's so tough to do like a barista shift with not that much money per hour,
Yeah.
and then take that money, go buy like trays and coffee from other roasteries,
Yeah.
and just grind that up to kind of practice.
Practice, yeah.
It's not a thing that
Yeah, well, it takes resources.
it takes too much
if you want to take
resources
it
and
that
time.
seriously, it
Yeah.
takes a lot of resources.
And look at the like the teams that
Yeah.
now go to
Well,
these
nowadays, yeah.
nowadays. It's like, and I wonder if it's worth it. Like
Yeah.
to come like 6 now for
Yeah.
Patrick,
Yeah.
because he must invested so much time and money into,
Yeah.
I think, as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think
He's like a machine. He's such
Yeah.
a great competing barista. And he's
Yeah.
like perfection into every detail.
Yeah.
And he has a company that actually is up and running now. So I
Right.
think he can manage to put aside himself and time
Yeah.
to really, really
To
practice,
focus,
to
yeah.
focus. But I wonder if like if he's happy. Like is
Yeah.
this
But I
something
think-
that was like, oh my God, I came to the finals in the Worlds.
Right.
I hope he sells more coffee.
Yeah.
Um
But I think as well, I think for him, it's not about the coffee. Like, it's not a marketing thing. It's just a personal
Yeah.
goal that he
Yeah.
has. But I think, you know, we when I was with Matt at like the WBC, it's pretty generally accepted by like, especially the people who are there. They're like, if you make it to the top 6,
Yeah.
then the top 6, like the rankings, you're very, very, like there's very, very little that splits them, kind of thing. And it could just be like, if it was another day, if the presentations were 2 hours
Yeah.
later, it could be someone else who's world champion. So the top 6 is kind of its own little beast where everything has to be perfect, and even if it is perfect, you might not win. But to get to the top 6 is also incredibly difficult now. But it's tough though too, because you want, like, we have a problem now in Sweden where we don't get enough competitors.
How do we solve that?
That's the question, because you don't want to have this barrier where you say like, look, it's going to take sponsorship and money and stuff to get like to compete. You want to break down the barriers and say like, look, you know, you don't need to complicate it. And I've said this before, like I think that for first-time competitors especially, the most important thing is just to compete.
Yeah.
Like, you're not going to come in, or unless you're an absolute god, which, you know, full respect if you do, but you're not going to come in on your first competition and win.
No.
But you will get so much from it, like really so much from it, connections and experience, and then knowledge of how to actually compete.
Be that like kind of local barista in your town that actually came like 5th in the Swedish Barista Championship.
Yeah, and you competed.
No one knows that there were only
barista.
5 baristas competing,
No.
but still, it's like, oh my God, you got
and
to
to
the
be able to
finals.
say you're a competitive
Yeah,
barista,
yeah.
like people, there is a bit of like, there's a level of respect that you kind of get from that. I actually reached out to there's a guy I follow on Instagram who's like, he's a photographer and like a triathlete, and he just moved to Stockholm or Sweden. And I reached out to him and I was like, hey, man, like, because he's into coffee and Essor. And I reached out and I was like, hi, I'm a ex-competitive barista. Do you want to have a coffee? Like, I can teach you a little bit more about like, you know, coffee and stuff. And then he was like, yeah, like, cool. So we ended up having this session together and stuff. And, you know, if I'd have said like, if I didn't say that I was an ex-competitive barista, I don't think that I would have gotten anywhere. But and as well, I think the most important thing, we talk about community, like the competition, it really builds that community. And like, for example, like last year, was it last year? Yeah, last year. No, that was this year. We had these competitions in Malmö, and I was there and I competed. Just because there wasn't enough competitors.
You had like 3 baristas, and then
there was 5. There was 5 with 2 weeks to go, and you need 6 to make it an official competition.
When I competed in Karlstad, I think it was like 2 or 4 full semi-final rounds.
Crazy.
I think it was like over 40 baristas competing, and we had like quarterfinals. Then we went into like top 6 or top 12, and then we had the finals.
If you compare the barista championships, if you compare the barista championships today and what it takes to like compete compared to then, like, I mean, I don't know, I wasn't around then.
I got shocked when we came to Bogota 2011. We were like, oh my god, we are world champions, and we got to like the backstage room,
right?
And we saw all the trays,
and
we were like, what is this? Can you carry out 4 cappuccinos at once?
Right.
Oh my god. So we had to like rethink everything, and we met the Japanese team. Out of, I think there were 11 people. Wow. They were like, oh yeah, we're back now for the second time, because we were here 3 months ago, full team, tried the coffee on the right altitude,
right?
Went back to Japan, had some practice, and now we're back with like, and they came 6.
Right.
Girl there came, I don't know, 3rd, I think.
Yeah.
Behind Matt Perger and Alejandro.
Right.
Mendes. But there's so much effort going in.
Yeah.
But you can also split that.
Right.
It's one thing, just as you say, like community building, get more people into competing. Just get them into the Swedish. And if you win, or in the end you're gonna probably go up against Patrick Rolfe, and just that's cool,
you.
or me, or whatever. Like some people that actually like, okay, I'm gonna go for the world finals. Right. Like I have everything, I have the trace, I have the team, but still that's fine. Like
but I think that turns some people off, because they don't want to go up against like a Patrick Rolfe or something like that.
So maybe you'll have like, split the competition up. Like to have
like
an espresso,
at the same time, like I think you never know what's gonna happen.
No.
Like I remember when I competed in Jönköping in 2018, Patrick competed as well, and that was the year that Matt won the first time, and actually Alex competed as well, and for example for Patrick, he was doing like a nitro like charge, and it froze on stage, so he ended up getting disqualified, I think. And then Alexander, do you remember the 2018 it was the milk descriptors, right? And so you never know what's going to happen up on stage. And then Matt, who'd never competed before, ended up winning. And to his credit, Matt's a fantastic barista. He's obviously world champion.
Then he realized he was a god.
And obviously he's the world champion now, but he like that was like first time, and I know that Matt obviously went into competitions wanting to win, but it is possible to kind of be a first-time competitor, go in and have, I mean, and who knows, if Alex, you'd have said your milk descriptors, or if Patrick hadn't have, like, the thing hadn't have frozen, who knows who'd have actually won. But there's always, there's always wild cards like that. And so you're better off just trying, And
just be involved, and as you say, like, grow as a barista, learn so much.
And as well, it can lead to opportunities. Like look at Håkan now, who came second. Like Håkan was the head barista at Pascal, and kind of deciding what he was going to do next. Like Håkan's been fantastic as well, like building his own brand and growing and everything. And he was kind of figuring out what the next step was. And then he competed, came second to Patrick, and I think it was pretty close. And Patrick was like, "Yeah, you're going to come and work for me," kind of thing. And so now he's in Copenhagen, and that connection would have never been made if he didn't even compete.
You really meet the right people.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And people in the industry, especially in the Swedish industry, like if you're on a national level, the people really want to pull people up. It's not that it's competitive. Like Patrick was helping Håkan with his flavor descriptors
Mm.
at the Swedish
Mm.
Championship. And like everyone was helping everyone in the room kind of thing. It's not like it's a competitive
No.
environment
No.
in that way. It's more like, oh yeah, sick. There's all these great competitors and like first time competitors. Let's help each other, like, and bring each other up. And I think that's really beneficial. And as a barista, like, if you're a barista in Sweden now and you think, oh, like, you know, I've just started or I've been working for a year and I'm thinking of competing, the connections that you'll make and the opportunities that will lead to is going to be way more beneficial in your career overall than maybe not competing and then just focusing on, like, you know, being a better barista or whatever, like making better coffee. Because at the end of the day, opportunity comes from connections.
Yeah.
And so that's my.
Cool. So, what I wanted to talk, bringing you in here.
Right. An hour and a half later.
No, it's super exciting. So here's Alex. What is this? Koji.
Oh, it's koji.
Koji infused.
Okay, this is the is it that fermentation? Is that Capo's concept kind of thing? Yes. Okay. Okay, so we cut that out.
Yeah.
Okay, so koji infused geisha. Fantastic.
Yeah.
And what is
Cool.
koji? It's the same fermentation process as you're adding a.
Maybe you need to bring in Alex for this.
Yeah, Alex, we're gonna need your expert here.
Take it later.
Okay, yeah. But I believe it's some sort of fermentation that they add. It's the same as wine. Yeah. So that's pretty cool.
That's cool. Good. It's a sample that we roasted a week ago. So it's nice. But what I want to talk to you about that we are kind of touching now is the community.
Right.
Like what you did with the Swedish Coffee Fest.
Yeah, Stockholm
And
Coffee
all
Fest.
the Stockholm Coffee Fest. Should be Sweden now, maybe.
Yeah, I think
And-
there's a trademark on the
Yeah.
Sweden Coffee Fest. That's why I didn't call it that.
And then what you do now.
Yeah.
Because I think your journey is amazing, and you now reached a spot on a company that you are actually tell us.
Yeah. So today I run Espresso Specialist, and so I'm the CEO, and I've been CEO since April this year. And I was essentially running as head of operations since like February last year. So that's been great. For me, it's like I've always been interested in business. I've always known that I'll end up in business somehow, and ideally like coffee business. So either having my own business or, you know, to what extent I never really knew. I kind of was very open with it. But I've always been kind of interested in business. You know, I'd read all the kind of business books before, you know, like before I moved to Sweden even. And so, I guess both of it kind of tie in. Like the Stockholm Coffee Festival was the first kind of like step into entrepreneurship for me. That was, I was 24 when we came up with the concept, so I was pretty young. And that was like, okay, nice. It wasn't even meant to be a business, actually. It was meant to just be like a cool event that we did. It was me and a few of my friends who were baristas at the time. All of them are out of the coffee industry now. I'm the only one left. But it was kind of a concept from lack of community, talking about community. So if I start with the coffee festival, like that. So I'd moved to Sweden 2017, like May 2017. Originally, it was like a 1-year plan, right? Like 1 year in Sweden, and then I'll see what's next kind of thing. And then pretty quickly, I realized, like, no, actually, I really like Sweden. Like, I really like the work of Pascal. I made a lot of great friends very quickly. And everything kind of went very smooth. Like, I really felt at home in Stockholm kind of thing. And so then start of 2018, I competed. And I was thinking like, oh, how can we make the community grow? Because when I came, there wasn't much community. You know, there was, you know, like Drop Coffee,
Mm.
Johan Nystrom,
Mm.
Pascal, like a lot of cafes,
Mm.
specialty coffees,
Mm.
coffee shops or special cafes or whatever, like around, but there wasn't much kind of collaboration or communication between the baristas. You know, the baristas at Drop didn't necessarily know the baristas at Pascal or whatever. And so I always thought that was kind of weird because in Paris,
Yeah.
everyone knew everyone.
Yeah.
Like if you were in the coffee industry, it was like there was events that you go to and you meet everyone and you kind of know everyone, right? And so I kind of picked up on that pretty early, like, oh, that's kind of weird, you know. And then obviously in Melbourne, like any kind of coffee event, like a cupping, we'll get like 100 people. And so I was like, damn, there's not much to do if you're a coffee guy here. And then I competed in 2018, so right at the start of 2018, and by then I was kind of like, yeah, I'm gonna stay in Sweden. And then at that competition, I was like, that was like my first kind of taste of the coffee community for real. Like it was really community feeling, and I was like, this is great. We need to do this more. And so the whole coffee festival, and I've spoken about this before, but the coffee festival is born from actually wanting to host the AeroPress Championship. So we the AeroPress Championship in 2017 was hosted at Drop, and it was a great event. You know, like a lot of people went, all the spots were filled on the competition, and we really wanted to keep it in Stockholm again, me and my friends, you know. And so we were talking like, how are we gonna do this AeroPress Championship in Stockholm? And we kind of reached out to a few people. I think we talked to like Joanna from Drop and stuff, and we're like, "Oh, you're gonna do it again?" She was like, "Nah, probably not this year." And we're like, "Damn, how are we gonna get the AeroPress Championship?" And we had this group chat on Instagram, and a friend of mine, Alex Chapman, who was kind of the one that I did the first round with, he was like, "Why don't we just hire out a shed?" Like kind of as a joke, like, "Why don't we hire out a shed and just do it there?" kind of thing. And then it was like, "Oh, actually, yeah, why not?" Like kind of back to that, like, oh, like let's do the cool thing, you know, and see what happens. Mentality, like it was like, oh, like why not? What's the worst thing that can happen, kind of thing. And so, you know, I reached out to a few people at like, you know, I think I reached out to like Joanna and like Victor, Espresso Specialist at the time, and who else? Maybe like maybe someone early. I can't remember exactly, but there was a few people really early on who I messaged, and I was like, hey, we're thinking of doing this. Like, would you be able to support it or promote it? And everyone was like, yeah, you should definitely do it. And then, so we were kind of like evolving the concept of the AeroPress Championship in Stockholm. And we kind of got to the point where we were like, oh, well, we don't want to call it the AeroPress Championship because not everyone knows what an AeroPress is. But everyone kind of can understand what a coffee festival is, right? So we decided, okay, well, let's do this thing. We'll call it the coffee festival. We'll hire out a shed. We'll maybe get some sponsors, you know, to have stands and stuff, and then we'll do it. And so the AeroPress Championship, you have to apply for it, because at the World AeroPress Championship, who has the rights to like the whole thing. So you apply for them to be able to host the national one, and then you have to pay this fee. And you know, they send you over like the cupping bowls and the like trophies and stuff. And I remember I wrote this letter to the AeroPress Championship, like this application, and I was like, oh, my name's Pierre. I'm the founder of the Stockholm Coffee Festival. We will host the Stockholm Coffee Festival in like, well, I can't remember. I think I said like August, like August of this year at this location, which is just some random location that I googled, like some event space. And we really want to host the AeroPress Championship at it, which is completely like bull. Like we didn't have any of that planned, you know. We just had an idea, and didn't hear back from him for like 2 months, or maybe not 2 months, but like at least a month. Maybe it was like 6 weeks. And I was like, okay, they're not gonna give it to us, you know. They kind of caught the lie. So it doesn't matter. Like we'll just go back to doing our things. And it was around that time that we started doing like the grid concept as well. So, you know, the grid, like we had this little community-based project where we would do like latte art throwdowns and cuppings and stuff. So that was around the same time that we were doing that, and we were like, oh, let's just grow the grid instead, and you know, do these latte art throwdowns and cuppings and stuff. And then one morning I woke up, because it's the WAC, the World AeroPress Championship, is this Australian-based company, and So obviously that time difference is very different. So I woke up one morning, you know, I can't remember, like a Saturday or something, and or maybe it was a Friday, and I checked my phone, and it was like, "Congratulations, you're hosting the Swedish Aeropress Championship 2018." I was like, "Oh, damn, we have to do it now." And so that was kind of crazy. Like, yeah, I think that was like that whole day. I was thinking, what have I got myself into? You know, I've never hosted an event before, like not at that scale.
So it was quite big. I've seen some pictures.
It was big. It was big, and it was much bigger than expected.
Yeah.
It was like we were expecting. We set a stretch goal of 300 people, and which was, you know, a lot of people for to go to an independent coffee event, right? You know, we'd done cuppings and latte art throwdowns, and we got like 10 or 15 people before, so 300 was like a big stretch for us. And I even remember, like, the morning of the festival, I was sitting in the van with like all the stuff unpacking. I was like, what if no one comes? Like, I remember we had one person message us and pull out of the Aeropress Championship, and I was like, oh, what if this is the start of like the waterfall of no one coming kind of thing? And we've brought these sponsors, and we're gonna do the Aeropress Championship, and I've promised all these things to these people. But then no, we ended up having like 800 people. Crazy. It was like 3 times almost as much as we expected. I think that when we opened the doors, it was a really intense day, because the whole planning process was okay, but it was a lot of new stuff for me, like asking for sponsorship. I'd never asked for sponsorship before. Finding a space and negotiating price. Like, how do you even do that? How do you even find an event space, right? And then organizing the Aeropress Championship, like getting people to sign up and stuff, and arranging like all of it, judges, MC. It was crazy. It was really crazy. It was very tough. Like, actually, it was really tough. Like, there was a lot going on as well because, you know, I was obviously working at Pascal full time. I just met my girlfriend, who I'm still with today, Amanda. And so, you know, kind of falling in love with her. And there was a lot going on to juggle, actually. And so, but the day of the festival, so, you know, we ended up bringing on like Oatly as a sponsor, and we set it up so we had like an espresso bar and a brew bar, because I wanted to really highlight the specialty coffee scene in Sweden, actually. And so I reached out to a few roasters that I knew, and I was like, oh, look, we're going to do this Stockholm Coffee Festival. Don't think it's going to be very big, but it would be cool if you could sponsor like 2 kilos of coffee. Like, if you could sponsor 2 kilos of espresso and 2 kilos of brew, then we can put you in like our booklet. And yeah, I think we had like 8 roasteries that first year. And we had I can't remember what the grinder was. Oh, I always blank on it. I think it was like a Matza ZM or something. It was one of those like shop grinders where you can, you know, you change the grind size for like each coffee. So we had all the shots running through like essentially an EK or like a Matza. And we had like all these different grind sizes for like espressos, and the poor people in the espresso bar, I put one of my best friends in there. And I was like, yeah, you know, can you run this? And he's like, yeah. And at the end, he was like, man, what did you do? I was so tough. Like 8 different espressos to dial in, and then serve during the day, and like try to keep the consistency and stuff like that, you know. So tough. So we had, the espresso bar with 8 different coffees. I think there was three baristas in the bar, you know, pumping out coffees. Like, that was so busy that day. You know, it was crazy. I think we ran out of like most of the coffee. You know, 800 people,
16 kilos of coffee.
16 kilos of coffee, everything run through like one grinder. Oof. And then we had a brew bar, so it was exactly the same concept, but we'd do like batch brew. So then that was much easier, you know. And then we had like Alexander was doing a roasting demonstration for us. And we had Espresso Specialist, and so Victor and those guys, because they'd put out the machines for us. And yeah, like that day was really intense, because me being super naive and never having hosted something before, I didn't even think of like power or water. And so I put
power and water. That's
yeah.
like,
Oh my god! And then they're like, yeah. When we brought out the machines, we're like, oh, we were gonna plug it in, and they were like, what do you mean? And there was like, we found out that at that venue that we got, it was like 2 water sources, and we had to feed from 2 different water sources the whole event. So like the Aeropress Championship and like the bars and stuff like that. So it was that was like a little bit of magic from those guys, and as well the power. Like we ended up balancing it, so it was okay. But I'm not kidding when I say if someone charged their phone,
Yeah.
it would blow the power. So that happened a few times actually. People like I remember we had one competitor who had his own kettle to
Yeah.
brew
Oh,
to
that's a killer,
and
the
we had the kettle
Yeah.
we had kettles on the thing, and he was like, oh, I'm gonna go up next, like can I just boil my
Yeah.
water here, and he plugged it in and the whole espresso bar went out, and I was like, oh my god, man, no, you can't. Sorry. And then we ran up to the thing and like the switchboard and turned on the switch and stuff. But yeah, like when we finally opened the doors, so 1 o'clock in the afternoon, I think we had like probably like 200 people right there at that time. And so that whole day is just kind of a haze. Like I don't really remember much. I just remember like very specifically some moments. But that was really cool.
The Aeropress.
That was Stephen Maloney.
It was. Oh.
And then that was another thing, like, budgeting. So the winner of the AeroPress Championship gets a ticket paid to like the World Championship, and the World Championship was in Melbourne. It was in Sydney.
Please, Norway.
And I was like, yeah, and I was like, oh yeah, nice. I haven't been back to Australia for like 3 years, but I'll send you back. That's no problem. So we ended up like, and it was fine. Like, and Stephen was great. Stephen and the Barista League like talk about hosting events. They host killer events. And so he knew, what it was like to host an event.
But did he do the Barista League back then?
Yeah, he did.
Yeah.
I think he just started doing it full time at that time.
Oh, they're like a few people.
They're international. Yeah, they're a full company around it. Super cool. Yeah. Yeah, they do like US tours and stuff. Really cool. Fantastic job. And that was the Stockholm Coffee Festival. So it was really born out of like this AeroPress wanting to do kind of thing. And that coffee festival was like, in my career, of all the things that I've done, that was probably the best. And because not only did we manage to get 800 coffee lovers to like come together and do enjoy coffee together, and we didn't just have baristas. What was really great about it was that we had baristas there, and the baristas would bring their friends. So you can count like maybe 100, 150 people like that.
Then 650.
But then the rest was like people who like coffee interested, regulars at cafe, people who like go to like drop coffee or whatever. And then so those people are the coffee interested people, but then they would bring their friends who weren't interested in coffee, and so it was such a great mix of people. Like you have some people who just have no idea about coffee, and you'd see them get up to the bar. I remember this actually, like to the espresso bar, and the menu was set up like it was a flavor wheel, and you choose based on like what flavor you wanted, kind of thing. And then you'd see these people who just had no idea that coffee could taste like this, and they'd order something, and they'd like it'd be like a Ethiopian like super peachy kind of coffee, and that they'd taste it and they'd be like, whoa, like this is so good, and you're like, sick, that's exactly what you want to see. And then obviously you have like these like real coffee pros who are like competing or like helping people out and stuff. So it was a really great experience. And so the coffee festival, then next year obviously we had to bring it back. And so obviously I had a little bit more of an idea of what to do, and because the first year was such a big success, it was a little bit more I was a bit more confident asking for sponsorships and stuff like that. So the second year ended up being a lot smoother, because I semi burnt out after the first one. Actually, it took me like a month and a half to probably like recover from just the intense stress. But the second year was great. So that was in a bigger venue right in the center of the city, and we actually asked the roasters to come. So we had like this roasters village. So the same concept as like the World Championships. But this kind of roasters village where the roasters had 2-hour time slots where they would brew their coffee. And then we had like this shop where people could buy scales and stuff, like
to get some cash roll.
Yeah, and we had like a really great partnership with Espresso Gear, and so they put all the equipment out, and then we had this and they kind of ran the shop. So and that was fantastic. Then we had some other sponsors as well, and that event was really great. That I think after that event, that was like, okay, this can actually be a sustainable thing. Like we like the strain of hosting it wasn't as much as the first year, because I knew a little bit more what I was doing. Our team was a little bit bigger. We were 4 people hosting it, running it that year instead of 2, and we kind of knew what to do, and so that was really cool. So that was
was it 1-day event?
It was a 1-day event. We actually we would have had more. That event we had 1,100 people. It was like 1,150 or something. Throughout the day, and actually like the venue that we got could only fit 300 people at a time, so there was a line the whole day. So we would have probably had more if we could fit more people in, but it was The line, I think it was like a 20-minute wait at one point to get in, and people were waiting. But when it was me who made the mistake, so I'll absolutely own up to my mistake. When we made the Facebook event, I made it a 2-day event. Like all of the marketing was one day, this day. I think it was like the 26th of November or something. So it was like all the marketing was like this day between these times. But the actual event, like the Facebook event, it was like, the time was 2 days. So I was getting calls the next day. People were like, "Oh, I'm looking for the coffee festival." I was like, "Oh, I'm really sorry, but
sleeping.
yeah, I was very tired." And I was like, "Oh, like that was yesterday."
Yeah.
And they're like, "Oh, but on Facebook it says it's today." I was like, "Oh, I'm so sorry. Like, I that's my bad. Like, it was yesterday."
Like
So
when you put everything into something like this and you make that kind of
it's just such a small mistake. It was so frustrating.
thing,
Yeah. But that's okay. I mean, they to that, they were very understanding, those people who called and said like, "Oh, no, that's okay, next year," kind of thing. And then so then 2020 we were planning on doing like scaling it up a little bit. So the budget from the second year to the first year was like a bit more than double, and then we were planning on having another, like doubling it again, and then with double that budget, then we would have been able to do like a bit more, a little bit more, maybe a 2-day event. And we wanted to do like a coffee week, so where we do like
tours and stuff.
Yeah, tours and like events and stuff like that all over Stockholm. And so we started to get that into the pipeline, but then Corona hit. So that was a bummer.
Yeah. And during Corona, you got your full-time work.
Yeah.
You were getting older. Will the Coffee Fest back?
I hope so. I hope so. I'm
maybe bring that energy into like something that we all need to put energy into when Corona is gone, to actually get those 5 competing baristas back to 20.
Yeah, well,
I think
I'm on the
like,
SCA now, so like I have the kind of the seat of like the events coordinator, so I can already start to do some stuff even if it's not the festival. But I would love to do the coffee festival, but I'm a little bit like you. There's always ideas spinning around, and it's a matter of like how much can you realistically do with the
you
with
need
the time.
to keep up quality on like taking time to do this podcast. Like gives us a lot, because otherwise it's just like everything just rolls on. But you only have like 5 days a week. Especially now I have 2 kids. Stuff. It's like so much stuff going on. And
we're not kids anymore. It's crazy.
But to bring those 5 competing baristas up to 20, and not by like begging me and Alex to be back on stage. Just
you want people to just naturally kind of fall into it and like take the risk. And I mean, there's different ways you can do it. Like one idea that I've had, and we'll see. But if we could do like regional competition, because I think that obviously you want to have the final, the big event in a big city. I mean, we saw that in Malmö, where you had a lot more people coming because it was there. And then ideally you don't have it, the event where you host the championships, you don't have it based around you don't call it the Swedish Barista Championship. You want to call it something else to draw people in.
Or like for the qualifications or the tour, whatever you want to call it, you don't need like certified judges. You don't need to go by the rules.
No, and you can do like make an espresso and a cappuccino. Like we'll provide the milk and the coffee. Even to that level kind of thing. Yeah, we'll see. If
they don't get the rules through, they can do like the
preliminaries
Stockholm tour or Swedish tour.
Yeah, because I think it would be great.
Just bring in interest.
Yeah, exactly, and bring in like. I mean, there are so many people who work in coffee, right? Like, I mean, think of how many, Bröd och Salt, Espresso House, like outside of like the independent cafes, there are a lot of people out there who make coffee for a living. There has to be, a certain percentage of them who would be willing to compete. You just need to
show them like kind of the upswing of going through the finals.
Yeah, and I think that for qualifications or something like that, you just need to make it as dumbed down as possible. So like someone who is going to do this qualification or this event, like they don't need to put any money in, they don't need to do anything. No. They can just like rock up and try.
It would be quite cool to bring in sponsors. So the qualifications or the preliminary rounds are for free and for everyone.
Yeah.
But if you choose go through, and it would be cool if you can get like 10,000 kroners.
Yeah.
To
Some sort of sponsorship.
some sort of sponsorship. So if you decide to go through, then you share this pot, and you get like, I don't know, some coaching hours, some porcelain, some trays. I don't know, like,
or just like a space to train.
Yeah,
even.
a space
like,
to train.
Something.
you have a great.
Yeah, well, I mean, we've got the
Yeah.
Coffee Academy,
Yeah.
which is, our space is enormous, and
Yeah.
we're not using it all.
No.
So we have the space,
Yeah.
and then that's fine for Stockholm,
Yeah.
right? And then I'm sure there's someone with space in Gothenburg,
Yeah.
and same in Malmö. And then just opening it up
Yeah.
as like a training space for
Yeah.
people who want to compete. And then like it would be cool to bring, I mean, like you or Alex or like Matt or someone who has competed at the World Championships to kind of maybe host like a workshop.
Yeah.
Like, this is what you should think about. This is what you need. To help people understand, like, okay, well, I'm going to need to make like, these coffees, and I need to have these trays and stuff like that. And then obviously, like, the winner of the top 3 of the regionals can get a free ticket to the final. And then all of a sudden, even if you just hold 3 regionals and the top 3 go through, boom, you've got 9. You even have room for people to pull out, and like not including anyone else who wants to compete. So that's one idea. No, that's one idea, and that's the one that I think is going to give like the most outside of, obviously just trying to get people to compete. But it's that barrier between, it's that kind of mental barrier, like, to compete, because people think, unfortunately, people think like, I'm going to go up against Patrick Rolfe. What's the point?
Yeah.
But that's not the right mentality. It's more like you get to push yourself, and if you want to take coffee seriously, you'll get more opportunities from a competition than you will from, being a good barista in your job. Like, that's the reality. So I hope that people compete.
I think we're gonna wrap this up.
Yeah. It's been fun.
It's been really fun, and I think we can go for a few more
Forever,
hours.
Yeah.
But let's have you back.
Absolutely.
When
I'd love to.
have you started in SCA, right?
Yeah, I've started now.
So let's take a couple of weeks or whatever and have a community-focused episode.
Cool.
We can bring in Alexander, maybe have 4 mics. I don't know.
Yeah.
Have an open discussion on how to go from 5 to 20 baristas in the Barista Championship.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love that.
Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you for having me.
All the links to your Instagram.
Yeah.
What you do daily.
Instagram, YouTube.
Find everything in the description of this video when it's up. And anyone wants, please subscribe to the channel. Make the push notifications, everything stuff is happening.
Can't miss quality content like this.
No, this is I love this time, because like for the last weeks we had so much boxes to pack, bags, everything, just to take this like in this case 2 hours, just walk with you. Yeah, super interesting.
It's been
Thank you
fun.
so much, Pierre.
Thank you very much for having me.
See you next time.
See you, everyone.
Bye.